The hum of the paper shredder vibrating through my kitchen counter was the only sound in the house. I held a single sheet of paper just above the metal teeth. A commercial land lease renewal. Annual rent, $1. My thumb grazed the signature line where my father was supposed to sign. The doorbell rang. I walked to the foyer. My bare feet stepped quietly across the hardwood. I checked the peephole. Marcus Rivera stood on my porch in the pouring Florida rain. His shoulders sagged. His tailored suit clung to his arms, heavy with water. In his right hand, shielding it against his chest from the storm, was a bank foreclosure notice with his own name printed in bold black ink. He looked straight into the camera lens of the doorbell. "Please, Jasmine, not like this. I have nowhere else to go." I looked at the man on my porch. Then I looked at the lease in my hand. He was begging for the very ground under his feet, and I held the deed. Before I tell you what I did with that paper, take a second to hit like and subscribe to Eva Tells Stories. Only do it if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment telling me your age and where you are listening from. I read every single one. My name is Jasmine Rivera. I am 32 years old. This is what happens when people mistake your survival for submission. Let me take you back 18 years to the day I learned what my father actually thought of me. I was 14. The air in Orlando in July feels like breathing through a wet wool blanket. My mother had passed away the year before. The scent of her vanilla perfume was still fading from the hallway closets when Marcus brought Linda home. Linda had a fresh manicure and a daughter named Ashley. Ashley was 13 and complained about the humidity before she even dropped her bags in the foyer. A week after they moved in, I came home from middle school and found my bedroom door open. My posters were gone. The bed frame was disassembled. I walked down the hall, letting my backpack slide off my shoulder. The door to the garage stood wide open. My mattress lay flat on the bare concrete floor, wedged between a stack of winter tires and a humming chest freezer. Marcus stood in the center of the garage. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. "Ashley needs a larger space for her dance equipment," he said. He avoided my gaze, choosing to stare at a rust stain near the water heater. I stood in the doorway. The garage had no insulation. The Florida heat radiated off the aluminum door, baking the air inside until it tasted like dust and old lawn fertilizer. My old bedroom was already filled with Ashley's matching pink luggage. I asked him how I was supposed to sleep in a room that reached 90 degrees by noon. Marcus walked past me into the air-conditioned hallway. He pulled a small, clear plastic lockbox from a hardware bag and secured it over the central thermostat. He snapped the small padlock shut and dropped the key into his pocket. "Ashley is sensitive," he said. His voice was smooth and practiced. "You are tough, Jasmine. You can handle it." I stood alone on the concrete. The compressor on the freezer kicked on. It let out a low, mechanical rattle that vibrated through my sneakers. I did not cry. I did not yell. I sat on the edge of my mattress, shoved between lawn tools and cardboard boxes. I made a quiet promise to myself. I would be exactly as tough as he wanted me to be. The air conditioning in the First Heritage Bank lobby felt like a physical weight. I sat in a leather chair across from a loan officer named Brenda. I was 18 years old. Today was the day I gained access to the custodial account my mother set up before she died. She funded it with her life insurance policy. It was intended for my college tuition. Brenda kept clicking her mouse. Her eyes darted from the monitor to the polished mahogany desk. She printed a single sheet of paper and slid it across the blotter. She did not meet my gaze. The balance, printed in black ink, read $0.00. I picked up the paper. My fingers felt numb. I asked Brenda for the transaction history. She printed 3 more pages. I scanned the withdrawal column. The money had not trickled out. It vanished in huge chunks over the past 6 months. A wire transfer to a private out-of-state university. A cashier check made out to a luxury auto dealership in Miami. Another wire transfer to a boutique interior design firm. My mother worked double shifts at a dental clinic for 10 years to build that safety net. Marcus wiped it out in less than a year. I drove back to the house. A brand new silver SUV sat in the driveway. The dealer tags were still bolted to the bumper. Linda was standing in the front yard, admiring the metallic paint while watering the hydrangeas. She waved at me. I walked past her without a word. Inside, the central air conditioning hummed. The hallway thermostat remained locked behind its plastic shield. I found my father in the kitchen. He leaned against the granite counter, sipping a glass of iced tea. Ashley sat on a bar stool nearby. She scrolled through her phone, bragging loudly to a friend about the ocean view from her new private dorm room. I placed the bank statements flat on the granite. I slid the papers toward his glass. The condensation from his drink soaked into the transaction dates. Marcus glanced down. He did not flinch. He did not look guilty. He took another sip of his tea and set the glass down. "Family expenses," he said. His voice carried the casual tone of a man discussing the weather. "We needed to upgrade the vehicle for safety reasons. And your sister got accepted to a prestigious program. We all have to make sacrifices." I pointed to the withdrawal for Ashley's tuition. "You used my mother's life insurance to pay for her daughter." Marcus crossed his arms. He leaned over the counter. "I raised you in my house," he said. "I kept a roof over your head. That money belonged to this family. Besides, you are smart. You are resilient." He offered a tight, patronizing smile. "You are tough enough to work your way up. Ashley needs the extra support. You do not." He waited for the explosion. He braced his shoulders, expecting me to scream, to cry, to throw the glass across the kitchen. He wanted the drama. A tantrum would allow him to play the victim. It would let him tell Linda and Ashley that I was acting irrational. It would justify his theft. I gave him nothing. I looked at the ice melting in his glass. I looked at Ashley, who had stopped talking on her phone, and watched us with wide, theatrical eyes. I picked up the damp bank statements, folded them neatly, and slid them into my back pocket. I turned around and walked down the hallway to the garage. The heat hit me the moment I opened the door. It wrapped around my throat. My mattress sat in the exact same spot on the concrete. I pulled the canvas duffel bag from under the bed. I packed 7 shirts, 3 pairs of jeans, my mother's old hairbrush, and a manila folder holding my birth certificate and Social Security card. I did not take anything Marcus bought me. I zipped the bag closed. The metal teeth catching on the fabric sounded like a period at the end of a long, exhausting sentence. I walked back through the kitchen. Marcus stood in the same spot. His patronizing smile had faded, his brow furrowed. "Where are you going?" he asked. The irritation in his voice cracked, revealing a sliver of genuine confusion. I did not answer. I walked out the front door and pulled it shut behind me. The heavy deadbolt clicked into place. That sound echoed in my ears all the way down the sidewalk. I walked 3 miles to the edge of town. My shoulder ached under the weight of the duffel bag. The Florida sun beat down on the asphalt. I stopped at a small, dimly lit pawn shop tucked between a laundromat and a discount grocery store. The bell above the door jingled. The air inside smelled of dust and old metal. I walked up to the glass display case and pointed to a cheap, beat-up Casio digital watch. The plastic strap was frayed. The face bore a deep scratch across the numbers. It cost me $12 from the tips I saved waiting tables over the summer. I buckled the stiff plastic band around my wrist. The digital numbers pulsed on the cracked screen. Marcus stole my past. He stole the safety net my mother built. But he would never steal my time again. I would track every minute of my own life from this moment forward. I moved into a cramped, 4th-floor walk-up apartment with 3 roommates. The building sat next to a busy highway. The walls vibrated every time a freight truck rolled past. My bedroom was the size of a closet, but the air conditioner worked and the thermostat had no lock on it. I took a job at a 24-hour diner off the interstate. I worked the graveyard shift, pouring coffee for tired truckers and wiping down sticky vinyl booths. My Casio watch beeped at the start of every hour. I tracked every dollar. I enrolled in community college, paying my tuition in cash. During the day, I sat in the back row of accounting classes, fighting heavy eyelids while the professor broke down tax codes and corporate ledgers. I chose to major in forensic accounting. I wanted to understand how money moved. I wanted to learn how to track hidden assets, how to read the paper trails that liars leave behind. Every time I studied a balance sheet, I thought of my father sipping iced tea in his kitchen. I sharpened my mind into a weapon designed to hunt down financial deceit. Months turned into years. 5 years passed without a single word from Marcus or Linda. No birthday cards, no awkward holiday text messages. The silence was a mutual treaty. They were too proud to check on the daughter they robbed. I was too busy building my armor to care. I graduated at the top of my class. I secured a job at a prestigious real estate auditing firm in Orlando. I bought my own car. I leased a quiet house with a backyard. I met a landscape architect named David who noticed the scratch on my cheap Casio watch on our first date. Instead of judging it, he asked for the story behind it. David had steady hands and a kind, grounded presence. He showed me what a home was actually supposed to feel like. I built a bulletproof life. I stood on my own concrete foundation. The garage and the stolen college fund felt like a distant nightmare. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, the screen of my phone lit up on my office desk. The caller ID displayed a name I had not seen in half a decade: Marcus Rivera. I stared at the vibrating device. My pulse ticked against the plastic band of my watch. He would not call to apologize. He would not call to reconnect. Men like my father only break their silence when they need something from you, or when someone dies. I answered the call. The voice on the other end was clipped and rigid. It delivered news that forced me to pack a black dress and drive straight back into the web I swore I had escaped. Abuela Rosa was gone, and Marcus was waiting for me at the funeral home. The screen of my phone went dark. A missed call notification appeared. A moment later, a text message popped onto the display. Rosa passed away. Wake is Friday at 2. You need to be there. My thumb hovered over the glowing glass. Around me, the corporate auditing firm hummed with quiet efficiency. Keyboards clattered under fluorescent lights. Printers churned out endless reams of paper. My dual monitors displayed a sprawling web of dummy corporations tied to a corrupt real estate developer. This was my sanctuary. I was a forensic real estate auditor. My job was to rip the masks off financial lies. I spent 40 hours a week dissecting escrow logs, tracing offshore equity, and hunting down fictitious property deeds. Fraud leaves a paper trail. Greed always creates a footprint. I was the predator hired to follow those tracks. Through the occasional holiday gossip relayed by a distant cousin, I knew the story Marcus sold to our extended family. He sat at Thanksgiving dinners and told everyone I was a struggling, low-level bookkeeper. He claimed I punched numbers at a depressing strip mall tax prep office. He painted me as a fragile failure who ruined her own life by walking away from his charity. The irony was a bitter pill. He had no idea I spent my professional life dismantling men who operated exactly like him. I packed my briefcase and left the office. The Florida sun baked the asphalt of the highway. I drove toward the quiet suburb where I built my real life. I pulled into the driveway of my starter home. The front yard was a lush sanctuary of drought-resistant ferns, native limestone, and towering oak trees. David was kneeling in the soil near the porch steps. He was a landscape architect. He wore faded canvas work pants and a gray shirt damp with sweat. His strong hands were coated in dark, rich earth. He was planting a row of white jasmine bushes. David stood up and wiped his hands on a rag. He read the tension in my shoulders before I even turned off the engine. He walked over. He smelled of crushed cedar wood, rain, and honest labor. He wrapped his arms around me. His embrace was a fortress of calm. David never demanded explanations or forced me to speak before I was ready. He simply offered his presence. We walked inside together. Our house was filled with natural sunlight. The central air conditioning blew a steady, cool breeze. David had replaced every drafty window and fixed every squeaky floorboard during our first month. He nurtured our environment. He did not lock comfort away behind a plastic shield. I sat at the kitchen island. I placed my phone on the granite counter. "Abuela Rosa is gone," I said. The words tasted like ash. David poured a mug of herbal tea and slid it toward my hands. He pulled up a wooden stool and sat close to me. Rosa was my maternal grandmother. She was the final thread connecting me to my late mother. When I moved into that cramped apartment 5 years ago, Rosa was the only family member who secretly checked on me. Crisp $50 bills would magically appear in my mailbox inside plain white envelopes. There was never a return address, just her distinct, elegant cursive handwriting on the front. She bought my groceries during the weeks I survived on instant rice and tap water. I stared into the steam rising from the tea. The cool kitchen faded away. I was transported back to the sweltering Florida garage. I was 15 years old. The August heat was suffocating. Sweat stung my eyes and soaked the collar of my shirt. The metal garage door ticked and groaned as it baked under the afternoon sun. The air smelled of spilled gasoline and damp cardboard. I heard the handle of the interior door click open. Rosa slipped into the stifling space. She wore a neat floral blouse and her silver hair was pinned back tight. She carried a tall glass of sweet tea. Thick beads of condensation dripped down the sides, pooling over her wrinkled knuckles. She pressed the freezing glass into my hands. The ice clinked against the rim. Rosa did not look at the stack of winter tires. She ignored the humming chest freezer. She looked directly into my eyes. Her gaze held a dangerous, quiet patience. She sat beside me on the edge of the mattress. She leaned in close. Her voice was a soft, steady breeze. "Let him think he is the king." "Mija." She reached out and tucked a damp strand of hair behind my ear. Kings fall when they forget they do not own the castle. I blinked the memory away. I took a slow sip of the tea David made for me. Rosa knew everything. She saw the emotional rot Marcus brought into our family. She understood the necessity of playing the long game. She could not fight my father openly without risking her access to me. So she played the role of the quiet mother-in-law while secretly watering the seeds of my survival. I picked up my phone and stared at the text message again. Marcus did not offer condolences. He did not ask if I was okay. He issued a sterile command. "Wake is Friday at 2. You need to be there." 5 years of heavy silence broken by an unyielding directive. Men like Marcus Rivera do not break half a decade of estrangement out of sudden grief. They do not invite defiant daughters to family gatherings to mourn in peace. He needed something. The funeral was not a memorial service. It was a staging ground. He was setting a trap. Funerals make people vulnerable. Grief softens boundaries. He intended to use the emotional weight of a church full of relatives to force my compliance. I stood up from the kitchen stool. David watched my expression shift. The sorrow receded. A cold, calculating focus took its place. I walked into our bedroom and opened my closet. I reached past the bright summer dresses and pulled out a tailored charcoal black suit. David stood in the doorway, leaning against the wooden frame. "Do you want me to drive you?" he asked. His tone was steady. He was ready to put himself between me and my father. I shook my head. I picked up my beat-up Casio watch from the nightstand and slipped it onto my wrist. The cracked plastic screen caught the bedroom light. "No," I replied. "I need him to think I am walking in alone. I need him to believe he still has the upper hand." I zipped the black suit into a garment bag. Marcus thought he was summoning a fractured, desperate girl back into his domain. He believed his own fabricated stories. He expected a fragile bookkeeper who would bow her head and follow orders. He was about to meet a woman who dismantled frauds for a living. I grabbed my car keys. It was time to attend a wake. The heavy mahogany doors of the Shady Grove funeral home shut behind me. The air inside felt thick. The scent of decaying white lilies clashed violently with the sharp bite of cheap men's cologne. The reception room was packed. Aunts I had not seen since high school clustered near the velvet seating. Distant cousins picked at stale sandwiches near the back wall. The muted organ music piped through the ceiling speakers did little to drown out the low murmur of small talk. I adjusted the lapels of my charcoal suit. The cracked screen of my Casio watch brushed against my cuff. Marcus stood near the entrance to the viewing parlor. He wore a crisp, tailored navy suit. His silver hair was perfectly swept back. He played the grieving son-in-law with practiced grace. He nodded solemnly at an elderly neighbor, patting the man on the shoulder. Linda stood beside him. Her black dress was expensive, her blonde highlights fresh. She dabbed her dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Ashley hovered near the catering table. She tapped frantically on her smartphone screen. Her Miami med spa was her entire identity. She constantly posted photos of chemical peels and lip fillers, tagging luxury brands to project an image of effortless wealth. She looked up, spotted me, and her manicured fingers froze. She leaned over and whispered something to her mother. Marcus turned. His eyes locked onto mine across the room. He did not smile. He excused himself from the neighbor and cut a direct path through the crowd. Linda followed a step behind, her heels clicking softly on the marble tile. The fake grief vanished from their faces. A predatory urgency replaced it. "Jasmine," Marcus said. His voice dropped to a low, commanding register. He did not offer a hug. He did not say he was glad to see me. "You are late. The service ended an hour ago." I checked my watch. "I am exactly on time for the reception," I replied. The tone of my voice was flat. I kept my posture relaxed. Linda sighed. She crossed her arms over her chest. "It is a stressful day for everyone," she said. Her gaze drifted over my dark suit, assessing the fabric, judging its worth. "Let us just handle business so we can go home." Marcus grabbed my elbow. His grip was tight, a physical assertion of authority. He steered me away from the center of the room toward an empty corner near the silver coffee urns. Linda flanked my other side. They boxed me in, creating a private barrier away from the prying eyes of the extended family. Marcus reached inside his suit jacket. He pulled out a folded legal document. He smoothed the thick paper flat on the catering table, dodging a stack of styrofoam cups. A silver pen appeared in his other hand. "Sign this," he ordered. His eyes darted toward the crowd, ensuring no one was paying attention to our corner. I looked down at the paper. The bold heading leaped off the page. "Quit claim deed." My name was typed clearly under the line designating the grantor. The grantee line listed Marcus Rivera. "What is this?" I asked. I did not reach for the pen. Marcus exhaled sharply. He pinched the bridge of his nose, playing the exhausted patriarch forced to deal with an unreasonable child. "Your grandmother made a terrible financial mistake years ago," he said. He kept his voice hushed, but the strain bled through. "She bought a massive plot of undeveloped land in Central Florida. It is a worthless, tax-heavy swamp. The county reassessed the property taxes last month. The bill is astronomical. It is draining the family accounts." Minda took a long sip of her red wine. The crystal glass caught the dim parlor light. Rosa was impossible, Linda muttered. Her tone dripped with old resentment. She was such a control freak. She would not even let us build a guest house on our own property. I swear. The woman lived to make our lives difficult. The statement hung in the air. A warning bell went off inside my head. The forensic auditor inside me snapped to attention. Why would Rosa, a woman living modestly on a fixed income, have the authority to block Marcus and Linda from building a guest house on their own land? Unless it was not their land. Kings fall when they forget they do not own the castle. Rosa's whisper from the sweltering garage echoed in my memory. I looked back down at the deed. Rosa left the swamp plot to you in her will, Marcus continued. His fingers drummed against the tabletop. It was a careless gesture. The property is toxic. If you accept the inheritance, the back taxes will ruin you. You do not have the income to cover it. Sign the rights over to me. I will absorb the debt and protect you from the county collectors. We are trying to save you from bankruptcy, Jasmine. He pushed the silver pen toward my fingers. He expected me to act like the frightened girl from the garage. He expected the low-level bookkeeper to shrink under the threat of financial ruin. He thought the intimidating presence of a formal legal document would force a quick, panicked signature. I picked up the document. I did not pick up the pen. I let my eyes scan the fine print. The legal description of the property sat near the bottom of the first page, a long string of numbers and letters identifying the exact geographic parcel. I need to read this carefully before I sign anything, I said. Marcus slammed his hand onto the table. The coffee urn rattled. A few heads turned in our direction. We do not have time for this, he hissed. The deadline to assume the tax burden is tomorrow. The county will seize the family assets if this is not resolved today. Sign the paper, Jasmine. His panic was raw. It was unpolished. It was entirely out of character for a man who prided himself on absolute control. Marcus Rivera did not take on toxic debt to protect anyone. He drained my mother's life insurance to buy an SUV. He did not sacrifice his own wealth out of parental concern. The land was not a burden. It was a lifeline. He needed it. Desperately. I slid my smartphone from my jacket pocket. I tapped the screen and opened the camera application. Before Marcus could react, I held the lens over the document and snapped a high-resolution photo of the parcel identification number. The digital shutter clicked loudly. "What are you doing?" Linda gasped. She nearly dropped her wine glass. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I set the unsigned document on the table next to the coffee cups. "I will have an attorney review this," I said. I smoothed the lapel of my suit. If the property is truly worthless, waiting a few days for a legal opinion will not hurt. Marcus stepped into my personal space. His face flushed a deep, mottled red. "Give me the phone," he demanded. I took a step back. I looked at him with clinical detachment. "You taught me to handle things on my own, Dad. I am handling it." I turned my back on him. I walked away from the catering table. I walked toward the heavy mahogany exit doors. Marcus lost his composure. The mask shattered completely. He shouted across the crowded reception room, "You ungrateful brat!" His voice boomed over the muted organ music. Every conversation in the parlor stopped instantly. Dozens of eyes snapped toward us. "You turn your back on this family after everything we have done for you. You walk out that door and you will get nothing. Nothing." Aunts and cousins stared in stunned silence. Ashley stopped texting and stared at her father. I did not stop walking. I pushed the heavy doors open and stepped out into the humid Florida afternoon. The glare of the sun forced me to squint. I walked to my car. My pulse was steady. My breathing was calm. I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was hot against my back. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the photo gallery. I zoomed in on the string of numbers representing the parcel deed. Marcus was terrified. His desperation was palpable. The swamp plot was a lie. The tax burden was a fabrication. He needed my signature to cover up a monumental secret. And I was going to follow the paper trail straight into the heart of his deception. The engine of my car hummed as I sat in the funeral home parking lot. The air conditioner blasted cold air against my face, cooling the sweat that had gathered on my forehead. I stared at the zoomed-in image on my phone. The string of characters forming the parcel identification number burned into my memory. Marcus expected me to be intimidated by the threat of tax debt. He thought the heavy atmosphere of a wake would pressure me into blind compliance. He miscalculated. He handed a forensic auditor the exact map coordinate needed to uncover his lie. I drove straight to my office. The corporate building was nearly empty on a Friday evening. The cleaning staff pushed vacuums down the hallway, their radios playing softly. I swiped my keycard, entered my suite, and locked the door behind me. I booted up my dual monitors. The screens flared to life, casting a harsh blue glow across my desk. I poured a stale cup of coffee from the break room carafe. The bitter taste anchored my focus. I logged into the Public County Property Appraiser website. The portal was designed for basic inquiries, allowing citizens to check property boundaries and annual tax assessments. I typed the parcel number from the photo into the search bar. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I hit enter. The screen loaded, hesitated, and then returned a glaring red error message. Document restricted. File access denied, pending administrative review. I sat back in my ergonomic chair. I tapped a pen against the edge of my desk. The public records were sealed. That did not happen by accident. Normal properties, even those tied up in probate court, leave a digital footprint visible to anyone with an internet connection. Someone intentionally placed a block on that specific file. Marcus managed the local branch of First Heritage Bank for 20 years. He knew the county clerks. He played golf with the property appraisers. He understood how the local bureaucratic machinery operated. He pulled a favor to temporarily freeze the deed transfer records, buying himself time to extract my signature before the truth surfaced. He built a digital wall to keep the low-level bookkeeper out. He forgot that I did not knock on front doors. I picked digital locks. I closed the public portal. I opened a secure, encrypted browser window. Forensic auditors do not rely on standard search engines. We use specialized databases designed to track state corporate tax filings, shell company formations, and agricultural land zoning exemptions. If a piece of dirt exists in Florida, someone pays a tax on it, and taxes always leave a receipt. I bypassed the county records entirely and accessed an obscure state-level database managed by the Department of Revenue. I cross-referenced Rose's Social Security number with historical land development filings over the last decade. The system churned for several minutes. A progress bar crawled across the screen. I took another sip of the bitter coffee. The results populated. A sprawling 50-page PDF document materialized on my left monitor. I scrolled past the title page. The legal description matched the parcel number from the quitclaim deed Marcus tried to force me to sign. I checked the zoning classification. It was not a worthless, tax-heavy swamp. It was 40 acres of pristine, undeveloped land in Central Florida. The property was zoned for high-density commercial retail. It sat directly adjacent to a newly approved highway expansion project. The state appraised value was listed at $4.2 million. My pulse quickened. The numbers stared back at me in stark black and white. Rosa did not own a burden. She owned an empire, and she placed the entire 40-acre parcel into an ironclad, irrevocable trust 10 years ago. The sole named beneficiary of that trust was Jasmine Rivera. I leaned closer to the monitor. A new section of the file caught my eye. A recent addendum was attached to the property record. It was a lien notice. Someone had taken out a commercial bridge loan against the property exactly 4 weeks ago. The loan amount was $250,000. The lender was a federal credit union based out of Miami. I pulled up the loan origination documents attached to the lien. My eyes scanned the signature lines. The borrower was listed as Rosa's estate. The signature at the bottom of the promissory note belonged to Marcus Rivera. Attached to the loan was a power of attorney form, granting Marcus full financial control over the property. I checked the date the POA was executed. It was dated 3 days before the loan was disbursed. The air in my office felt suddenly thin. I pulled up the calendar on my phone. 3 days before the loan originated, Abuela Rosa was transferred to the hospice care wing of the county hospital. Her medical records, which David and I had managed, clearly stated she was placed in a medically induced coma to manage her pain. She was unconscious. She could not hold a pen. She could not consent to a financial transfer. Marcus forged the signature. He fabricated a power of attorney document while the woman who protected me lay dying in a hospital bed. He used the fraudulent paperwork to bypass the irrevocable trust and secure $250,000 from a federal credit union. He stole from a ghost to line his own pockets. I scrutinized the final page of the forged POA. Every legal document requires a notary public to witness and verify the signatures. I zoomed in on the circular black stamp pressed into the bottom right corner. The notary seal read, Cynthia Vance, commission number 8675309. The name clicked into place. Cynthia Vance, Linda's cousin, the woman who always brought cheap grocery store potato salad to Thanksgiving dinner. Marcus did not just commit fraud alone. He roped his new wife's family into a federal crime to secure the cash. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together, forming a horrifying, desperate picture. Marcus secured the loan using fake documents. But banks do not hand over $250,000 without eventually conducting a thorough title audit. The federal credit union was undoubtedly reviewing the collateral. They would soon discover the irrevocable trust. They would realize Marcus had no legal authority to pledge the land. The federal investigators would start asking questions. Marcus was backed into a corner. He needed the true owner of the land to sign a quitclaim deed, effectively surrendering the property to him. If I signed the paper at the funeral home, I would have retroactively legitimized his theft. My signature would have erased the trust, transferred the title to his name, and covered his tracks right before the bank auditors arrived. He wasn't trying to save me from bankruptcy. He was trying to save himself from a federal prison sentence. I printed the entire 50-page document. The heavy laser printer hummed, spitting out the evidence page by page. I gathered the warm sheets of paper and slid them into a thick manila folder. I possessed the map, the weapon, and the motive. My phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up with a rapid succession of text messages. They were not from Marcus. They were from numbers I barely recognized. Aunts, uncles, and distant cousins. The messages flooded my screen, each one more hostile than the last. How could you do this to your father? Rosa would be ashamed of you trying to steal from the family. You are a greedy, heartless daughter. Marcus realized his ambush at the funeral home failed. He knew the clock was ticking down on the bank audit. He could not force my hand with a pen, so he pivoted his strategy. He weaponized the entire family tree. The smear campaign had officially begun. He intended to destroy my reputation, isolate me completely, and pressure me into submission through sheer social terror. I picked up my phone. I read the vicious messages one by one. My thumb hovered over the delete button. I did not delete them. I took screenshots of every single accusation. I slid the manila folder into my briefcase. The trap was set. Marcus was hunting a vulnerable girl from the garage. He had no idea. He just declared war on an auditor holding the matches. The barrage of text messages was only the opening salvo. By Monday morning, Marcus escalated his assault from angry family texts to a coordinated, multi-front smear campaign. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping a dark roast coffee while my phone buzzed incessantly. A notification popped up from a local community Facebook group. I tapped the alert. Linda had posted a lengthy, dramatic paragraph detailing her manufactured heartbreak. She claimed a certain ungrateful family member was currently exploiting a legal loophole to steal Rosa's estate, attempting to leave a grieving father homeless. She used words like elder abuse and financial manipulation. The post garnered 80 comments within the hour. Church members I had known since childhood offered their prayers and condemned my non-existent greed. My father was a master at spinning narratives. He understood the mechanics of small-town gossip. He knew that the first person to cry in public usually wins the court of public opinion. He banked on the assumption that I would fold under the pressure of social ostracization. He expected me to rush to defend myself, to engage in a messy, public screaming match that would only validate his claims of my instability. I did not comment. I did not post a rebuttal. I took a screenshot of the Facebook post, printed it out, and slid it into a heavy, black 3-ring binder. I was building a physical archive of his destruction. The binder sat on the kitchen counter, thick, with 50 pages of property deeds, the forged power of attorney, and the fraudulent loan documents. Every lie he told, every text he sent, became another tabbed exhibit in my growing arsenal. The social sabotage was expected. The economic warfare, however, demonstrated a new level of desperation. Around 10 in the morning, David walked through the front door. He was supposed to be supervising a large commercial installation at a boutique hotel downtown. Instead, he stood in the foyer, wiping soil from his hands with a heavy canvas rag. His expression was unreadable. His shoulders were tense. I closed my laptop. "What happened?" I asked. David walked into the kitchen. He set his keys on the counter. "Marcus called the hotel management group," David said. His voice was steady, but a quiet intensity simmered beneath the surface. He told the project director that my landscaping company was under investigation for embezzling construction materials. He claimed we were inflating invoices to fund a legal battle against his family. The project director panicked. They suspended our contract pending an internal review. The air in the kitchen turned cold. Marcus was not just attacking my reputation, he was attacking my husband's livelihood. He targeted the business David spent 7 years building from the ground up. He wanted to drain our resources, forcing us to spend our energy defending our income rather than scrutinizing the fraudulent deed. I felt a sharp spike of anger bite at the back of my throat. It was the first true flash of rage I had felt since leaving the sweltering garage. I stood up, gripping the edge of the granite counter. "I am calling the police," I said. "I will file a harassment report. I will get a restraining order." David placed a hand over mine. His palm was rough, calloused from years of shaping stone and earth. He did not mirror my anger. He projected an unshakable, grounded calm. "Do not interrupt an enemy while he is making a mistake," David said softly. He let go of my hand, walked over to the coffee maker, and poured himself a mug. He leaned against the counter, taking a slow sip. Let him dig his grave deeper. Every phone call he makes is another tortious interference claim. Every email he sends is documented defamation. We do not fight him in the mud. We fight him on paper. His words centered me. The flash of rage dissolved, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. David was right. Emotional reactions were exactly what Marcus wanted. He craved the drama. He needed the chaos to distract from the $250,000 federal fraud sitting in my black binder. I sat back down at the island. I opened my laptop. I am going to need to trace the IP addresses of the anonymous emails sent to the hotel, I said. David nodded. I already asked the project director to forward the communication logs to our attorney. We will have the metadata by this afternoon. We spent the next 4 hours transforming our kitchen into a war room. I cross-referenced the timestamps of Marcus's calls to the hotel with the cell phone records I legally pulled using my forensic auditing credentials. I mapped out the timeline. He forged the power of attorney. He secured the fraudulent bridge loan. The bank began their audit. He failed to secure my signature at the wake. He initiated the smear campaign to force my hand. And finally, he sabotaged David's contract to cut off our financial resources. The pattern was flawless. It was a textbook escalation of a desperate man running out of time. I printed the metadata logs linking the defamatory emails directly to the IP address of Marcus's home router. I punched holes in the crisp sheets of paper and snapped them into the black binder. The spine strained under the weight of the evidence. It was no longer just a collection of documents. It was a loaded weapon. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my email inbox chimed. A new message arrived. The sender address belonged to a corporate law firm based in downtown Orlando. The subject line read, "Urgent, Estate Resolution, Rivera Family Trust." I opened the email. It was composed by an attorney named Sterling. The language was overly formal, dripping with veiled legal threats. Sterling claimed to represent Marcus Rivera in the matter of Rosa's estate. The email accused me of holding the family assets hostage and delaying necessary tax payments. The final paragraph contained an ultimatum. My client, in the interest of family harmony and to avoid costly litigation, requests your presence at a reconciliation dinner this Thursday evening at 8 o'clock. We intend to resolve the quitclaim deed signature in a private, mediated setting. Failure to attend will result in immediate legal action. I read the email twice. Marcus realized the smear campaign was not working fast enough. The bank auditors were closing in. He hired a slick, aggressive lawyer to intimidate me in a public setting. He chose a high-end restaurant, a space where he felt powerful and in control. He wanted to trap me at a table, surrounded by his legal muscle and his loyal family members, to bully me into signing away my inheritance and covering his federal crime. David read the email over my shoulder. He crossed his arms. "Are you going to decline it?" he asked. I looked at the black binder sitting on the counter. The edges of the paper were perfectly aligned. The evidence was insurmountable. Marcus wanted a public confrontation. He wanted a final, dramatic showdown to bend me to his will. He believed I was still the silent, frightened teenager sleeping next to a chest freezer. I clicked the reply button. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a fraction of a second. I typed a single, concise sentence. "I will be there." I hit send. The email vanished into the digital ether. The reconciliation dinner was set. Marcus thought he was dragging me to an execution. He did not realize I was bringing the guillotine. The glow of my dual monitors illuminated the dark corners of my home office. It was Wednesday night, 24 hours before the reconciliation dinner. The house was entirely silent, save for the rhythmic clicking of my keyboard. I sat hunched over my desk, meticulously indexing the final pages of the black binder. Every document was tabbed, color-coded, and cross-referenced. I was preparing for a corporate execution, and precision was my executioner. I pulled up the Federal Credit Union loan disbursement record one last time. I needed to ensure my timeline was flawless. Marcus forged Rosa's signature on the power of attorney to secure a $250,000 commercial bridge loan against the 40 acres of prime real estate. The crime was clear, but as a forensic auditor, I knew that securing the funds was only half the equation. Fraud is a living organism. It needs to consume cash to survive. I needed to track where the $250,000 actually went. I traced the wire transfer originating from the credit union. The funds did not land in a personal checking account. They did not route to an offshore shell company. The money flowed directly into a corporate business account registered in Miami. I pulled the incorporation documents for the receiving entity. The business name was registered as Luminous Aesthetics, LLC. The primary operating address matched a high-end commercial storefront in South Beach. It was Ashley's Med Spa. I leaned back in my chair. The pieces shifted, forming a new, ugly picture. Ashley constantly projected an image of effortless wealth on social media, boasting about her booming business. Yet behind the Instagram filters, her luxury spa was drowning in debt. She was burning through cash to maintain the facade. The federal bridge loan was a desperate $250,000 bailout to keep her business from collapsing. Initially, the narrative seemed obvious. Ashley, the golden child who received my stolen college fund, demanded more money to fund her failing vanity project. She pressured Marcus to secure the cash. Ashley was the orchestrator, manipulating her indulgent stepfather into committing federal bank fraud on her behalf. I pulled up the corporate guarantees attached to the Med Spa bailout loan. Whenever a business receives a massive influx of debt, the primary stakeholders must sign personal guarantees, legally binding them to the repayment terms. I opened the PDF file containing the signature pages. Ashley's stylized, looping signature stretched across the bottom line. It made perfect sense. She signed the debt agreement to save her spa. I prepared to build a new section in the binder, one dedicated to destroying Ashley's financial standing alongside Marcus. But my auditor training kicked in. You never trust the ink. You verify the metadata. I ran the PDF signature page through a digital forensics tool designed to analyze document creation software. I needed to see exactly when and where the digital signature was applied. The software parsed the code for several minutes. A detailed log file generated on my right monitor. I read the metadata. My breath caught in my throat. The digital signature attributed to Ashley was not executed in Miami. It was not signed from her IP address. The geographic location stamp pinged back to the exact same router in Orlando that originated the forged power of attorney. Furthermore, the timestamp indicated the signature was applied at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I pulled up Ashley's social media feed. On that specific Tuesday at 3 a.m, Ashley was live streaming a yacht party in the Florida Keys. She was nowhere near a computer. She was not signing legal corporate guarantees. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Ashley did not orchestrate the fraud. She did not sign the debt agreement. Marcus forged her signature too. He needed the loan to bail out his stepdaughter's business to maintain the illusion of their perfect, wealthy family. But he knew the Med Spa was a sinking ship. He knew the debt was toxic. To secure the cash without legally exposing his own personal assets, he threw his golden child under the bus. He falsified the corporate guarantees, legally binding Ashley to $250,000 of federal debt without her knowledge or consent. If the feds audited the loan, Ashley would face federal charges for a signature she never authorized. Marcus sacrificed the daughter he pampered to save his own skin. I printed the metadata logs, the laser printer word spitting out the irrefutable proof of his ultimate betrayal. I slid the crisp pages into a new, red-tabbed section of the binder. The trap was no longer just for Marcus. It was for the entire illusion he built. Thursday evening arrived. The Florida heat broke, giving way to a cool, damp dusk. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror. I did not wear a power suit. I did not dress to impress the lawyer or intimidate Linda. I wore a simple, tailored navy dress and flat, sensible shoes. I reached onto the nightstand and picked up my Casio watch. The plastic band was stiff. The deep scratch across the digital face caught the dim bedroom light. I strapped it to my wrist. The watch was a physical reminder of the diner shifts, the exhausted nights, and the promise I made to myself in the sweltering garage. I did not need to wear wealth to project power. David stood in the hallway. He handed me my car keys. He did not offer empty platitudes or tell me good luck. He simply looked at me and said, "Bring the walls down." I drove to the steakhouse. It was located in an upscale district of Orlando, a place defined by valet parking, dark mahogany interiors, and exorbitant prices. It was Marcus's territory. It was the kind of restaurant where men in expensive suits conducted business over rare cuts of beef and single malt scotch. He chose this venue deliberately to make me feel small, out of place, and overwhelmingly outnumbered. I handed my keys to the valet and walked through the heavy glass doors. The host directed me to a private dining alcove tucked away in the back of the restaurant. Heavy velvet curtains shielded the table from the main dining floor. I stepped through the curtains. The scene was meticulously arranged. Marcus sat at the head of the long oak table, nursing a glass of bourbon. He wore a sharp charcoal suit. Linda sat to his right, her posture rigid, her neck adorned with a heavy diamond pendant. Ashley sat next to her mother, scrolling through her phone, looking profoundly bored by the entire affair. To Marcus's left sat an older man in a tailored pinstripe suit. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed. An expensive leather briefcase rested on the chair beside him. This was Mr. Sterling, the slick attorney hired to strong-arm me into submission. None of them stood when I entered. None of them offered a greeting. They looked at me the way one looks at a delayed flight or a minor traffic jam, a nuisance they were about to efficiently swat away. Marcus gestured lazily toward the single empty chair situated at the far end of the table, directly opposite him. "Have a seat, Jasmine," he said. His voice was dripping with forced, patronizing patience. "Let us try to act like adults tonight and get this unpleasantness over with." I walked to the end of the table. I did not sit down. I placed my heavy, black 3-ring binder onto the polished oak surface. The thick stack of paper hit the wood with a dull, heavy thud. Sterling raised an eyebrow. He steepled his fingers, staring at the binder. Linda scoffed quietly, taking a sip of her wine. Ashley did not even look up from her screen. They believed I was holding a collection of emotional grievances. They thought I brought a diary. They had absolutely no idea they were staring at an explosive device. The waiter slipped through the heavy velvet curtains carrying a silver pitcher. He filled the crystal water glasses around the oak table in total silence. The clinking of ice cubes provided the only soundtrack to the heavy, suffocating tension filling the private dining alcove. Nobody spoke until the waiter bowed his head and retreated, pulling the thick fabric shut behind him. We were isolated from the main dining room. The scent of seared steak and expensive bourbon lingered in the air, masking the bitter reality of why we were gathered. I pulled out my own chair at the far end of the table and sat down. The polished wood felt cool beneath my palms. I kept my posture straight. I did not fidget. I did not adjust the collar of my navy dress. Sterling took the initiative. The silver-haired attorney snapped the brass latches of his briefcase. The sharp metallic clicks echoed like a judge striking a gavel. He reached inside and extracted a thick stack of legal documents, placing them squarely in front of him. He smoothed the top page with a manicured hand. He did not look at me with respect. He looked at me the way a hawk looks at a field mouse. "Ms. Rivera," Sterling began. His voice was a rapid, rhythmic drumbeat of legal jargon designed to disorient and intimidate. "I am going to save us all a significant amount of time tonight. Your father brought me in to manage the administrative nightmare your grandmother left behind. The property in question is currently facing severe tax liabilities. If you refuse to sign the quitclaim deed this evening, I will have no choice but to petition the probate court. We will tie this estate up in litigation for the next decade." He paused, letting the threat of a 10-year legal battle hang in the air. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You will be deposed," Sterling continued. "You will be required to hire your own counsel, which will drain whatever meager savings you possess. I will file injunctions against your personal accounts to cover the outstanding municipal debts. I will drag you through discovery, mediation, and endless hearings until the legal fees force you into bankruptcy. Or you can sign this single piece of paper right now. You walk away clean, your father assumes the financial burden, and you go back to your quiet life." He slid the familiar quitclaim deed across the smooth oak surface. It stopped inches from my fingertips. The silver pen Marcus tried to force on me at the funeral home rested right beside it. My auditor training allowed me to listen without reacting. Sterling sounded incredibly convincing. To an untrained ear, his threats were terrifying. But I knew the law. I knew that an irrevocable trust bypasses probate court entirely. The land was never part of Rosa's estate. Sterling was bluffing. He was betting everything on my ignorance. He assumed I was a naive bookkeeper, easily frightened by complex vocabulary and the looming shadow of financial ruin. Linda shifted in her seat. She crossed her legs and offered a tight, victorious smirk. She reached for her wine glass, clearly believing the lawyer had just delivered a fatal blow. Ashley let out a loud, dramatic sigh. She checked her phone screen, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. "Can we hurry this up?" Ashley complained. Her voice carried the bored, entitled drawl of someone who had never faced a real consequence in her life. "I have a promotional launch for my spa tomorrow morning. I need to get my beauty sleep. I do not have time to sit here while she throws a tantrum." Marcus raised a hand, silencing his stepdaughter. He seamlessly transitioned into his role as the weary, benevolent patriarch. He adjusted his suit jacket and offered me a look of deep, manufactured sorrow. "We just want to move on, Jasmine," Marcus said. His tone was soft, pitched perfectly to sound reasonable to anyone who might be walking past our private alcove. "This has been a difficult week for everyone. Losing Rosa was hard enough. We do not need to tear this family apart over a piece of useless swampland. I am trying to protect you. I am trying to take this burden off your shoulders. Do not be difficult. Just sign the paper and we can put all this ugliness behind us." He stared at me, waiting for the capitulation. He expected me to reach for the silver pen. He expected me to surrender. When I kept my hands folded in my lap, Marcus sighed. He decided to switch tactics. The intimidation from the lawyer did not crack my resolve, so he opted for bribery. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his charcoal suit. He retrieved a small, square box covered in dark blue velvet. He placed the box on the table and flicked the lid open. Resting on a cushion of white silk was a brand-new Rolex watch. The silver and gold links gleamed under the recessed lighting of the alcove. The diamond markers on the dial caught the light, sparkling with undeniable, extravagant wealth. It was a heavy, imposing piece of jewelry designed to project status. "I know things have been strained between us," Marcus said. His voice took on a magnanimous, forgiving quality. "I know you have worked hard. I want to show you that I appreciate your resilience. Consider this a peace offering, a token of my affection. Take the gift, sign the deed, and we can start fresh." He pushed the velvet box across the long oak table. It glided smoothly, coming to a halt right next to the threatening legal document. The carrot and the stick sitting side by side. Sign away a multi-million-dollar property and receive a shiny trinket in return. It was the ultimate insult. He still believed my compliance could be purchased. He still thought he was negotiating with a girl who had nothing. I looked down at the gleaming Rolex. I did not touch the velvet box. I did not reach for the watch. Instead, I raised my left arm. I pulled back the cuff of my navy dress. The harsh dining room light hit my wrist. I wore the same cheap, beat-up Casio digital watch I bought at the pawn shop 14 years ago. The plastic strap was stiff and discolored. The deep scratch running diagonally across the digital display was impossible to ignore. It was a rugged, ugly thing born out of desperation and survival. I extended my arm over the table. I tapped my index finger against the scratched plastic screen of the Casio. The hollow, plastic tapping sound cut through the silence of the dining alcove. "No thanks," I said. My voice was loud, clear, and perfectly steady. "I already have the time." Marcus blinked. His benevolent smile faltered. The rejection confused him. Sterling frowned, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Linda lowered her wine glass, her smirk dissolving into a tight frown of annoyance. I lowered my arm. I reached down to the floor where I had placed my large leather tote bag. I unzipped the top compartment. I did not pull out a pen. I reached past my wallet and extracted a thick, heavily packed manila folder. It was a condensed version of the black binder I built in my kitchen, containing only the most lethal, irrefutable evidence of their deception. I lifted the manila folder and dropped it squarely in the center of the oak table. The heavy stack of paper hit the wood with a loud, resounding thud. It landed right between the quitclaim deed and the velvet box holding the Rolex. The impact caused the crystal water glasses to vibrate. Sterling stared at the manila folder. His professional composure slipped for a fraction of a second. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at the unexpected prop. The trap they spent days building was about to snap shut. But they were no longer the ones holding the trigger. The heavy thud of the manila folder hitting the oak table hung in the air. The ice shifted in Linda's glass, a sharp clink that amplified the sudden, suffocating silence inside the velvet alcove. I kept my hands resting flat on the polished wood. I did not look at my father. I did not look at the gleaming Rolex or the threatening legal document. I looked directly at Mr. Sterling. The high-priced attorney narrowed his eyes, studying the thick folder. His predatory confidence wavered, replaced by a cautious, calculating scrutiny. He understood that a woman who ignores a bribe and challenges a legal threat does not do so empty-handed. I opened the manila folder. "You should know," I said, keeping my voice level and conversational, "that your client provided you with incomplete files." Marcus let out a short, dismissive laugh. "What is this, Jasmine? Are you trying to play lawyer now? Stop wasting our time." I ignored him. I pulled the first set of stapled pages from the folder. The bright yellow tab at the top corner marked it as Exhibit A. I slid the packet across the smooth table, bypassing the quitclaim deed, until it came to rest directly in front of Sterling. "I suggest you review those documents before you threaten me with probate court again," I told the attorney. Sterling adjusted his tailored cuffs. He picked up the packet. His eyes scanned the first page. It was the certified copy of Rosa's irrevocable trust deed, establishing my sole ownership of the 40-acre parcel long before her death. I watched his silver eyebrows rise slightly. He turned the page. The next document was a copy of the $250,000 federal commercial bridge loan Marcus secured against the property. Attached to the loan document was the power of attorney form. Sterling scrutinized the signature on the POA. Then he turned to the final page in the packet. It was a certified medical record from the county hospice care facility. I had highlighted a specific paragraph in bright yellow ink. The medical chart clearly stated that on the exact date the power of attorney was supposedly executed, Rosa Rivera was unconscious, resting in a medically induced coma. The color drained from Sterling's face. His tan, manicured complexion went a sickly shade of chalk white. He stared at the hospice record. Then his eyes snapped to the notary stamp on the bottom of the forged POA. He looked up at me. I nodded slowly. "Your client used a forged power of attorney to illegally pledge a property held in an irrevocable trust to secure a $250,000 commercial loan from a federal credit union," I explained. My voice cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a scalpel. "He committed federal bank fraud. He used a relative's notary stamp to execute the forgery. And you just threatened to sue me to cover his tracks." Sterling dropped the papers onto the table as if the pages were laced with poison. He turned his head and stared at Marcus. The slick, professional arrogance was entirely gone. It was replaced by the terrified realization of a lawyer discovering he was unwittingly acting as an accessory to a federal felony. Marcus felt the shift in the atmosphere. The blood rushed to his cheeks. He leaned forward, trying to snatch the papers from Sterling's side of the table. "That is a lie," he sputtered. "Those documents are fabricated. She printed fake records to confuse you. Do not listen to her." I did not raise my voice. I pulled the second packet from my manila folder. This one had a bright red tab. I slid it down the table. It bypassed Sterling. It bypassed Linda, who was now clutching her diamond pendant, her mouth slightly open. The packet came to a halt right in front of Ashley. Ashley stared at the paper. She did not pick it up. She looked at me, genuine confusion warring with her usual bored entitlement. "What is this?" she asked. "Those are the corporate guarantees attached to the federal loan," I said. Ashley frowned. "I do not care about his loan. I am not involved in this." "You are very involved," I replied. "Open it. Look at the signature page." Ashley picked up the packet. She flipped to the last page. Her eyes widened. A stylized, looping signature stretched across the borrower line. It was her name. It was her business, Luminous Aesthetics, LLC, listed as the primary recipient of the fraudulent funds. She dropped the packet. She looked at Marcus. "What did you do?" she asked. Her voice trembled. "I answered for him. He needed the cash to bail out your failing med spa," I said. "He needed to maintain the illusion that his golden child was running a successful luxury business. But he knew the spa was bleeding money. He knew taking on $250,000 of toxic debt under his own name would ruin his personal credit if the business defaulted." I pulled out the final piece of evidence from the folder, the metadata log from the digital signature verification software. I slid it over to Ashley. "He didn't just forge Abuela's signature to get the cash, Ashley," I said softly. "He forged yours to accept the debt. The metadata proves the digital signature was applied from his home router in Orlando at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. The same Tuesday you were live streaming a yacht party in the Florida Keys." Ashley picked up the metadata log. Her hands shook violently. The paper rattled against the polished oak table. "If the federal bank auditors discover the forged POA," I continued, my gaze locked on my stepsister, "they will trace the funds. They will look at the corporate guarantees. You are legally on the hook for $250,000 of stolen federal money. You will face the fraud charges. He threw you under the bus to secure the cash." The Golden Family Alliance shattered in an instant. The illusion of the loving, protective patriarch evaporated, leaving behind nothing but the ugly truth of his self-preservation. Ashley's jaw dropped. The reality of the federal debt crushed her carefully curated reality. She turned slowly to look at Marcus, her face contorted with a rage so raw and pure it physically altered her appearance. "You set me up!" she screamed. The sound tore through the velvet curtains, echoing out into the main dining floor. "You forged my name. You put me in debt to the federal government. I will go to prison because of you." Marcus shrank back in his chair. He held his hands up, palms out, trying to placate the monster he created. "Ashley, sweetie, calm down. Let me explain. I was trying to save your business. The spa was going under. I had to act fast to protect you. We can fix this." "You lied to me," Linda shrieked, joining her daughter's assault. She slammed her wine glass down on the table, shattering the delicate crystal stem. Dark red wine flooded across the oak, soaking into the bottom edges of the quitclaim deed. "You told me the loan was for a safe investment. You put my cousin's notary license on the line. You are going to destroy us all." The alcove devolved into chaos. Ashley stood up, knocking her heavy wooden chair backward. She screamed at Marcus, threatening to call the police herself. Linda sobbed, trying to wipe the spilled wine off her expensive dress, wailing about losing her lifestyle. Marcus shouted over them both, his tough demeanor completely obliterated by the panicked shrieks of the women he spent years trying to impress. Amidst the screaming and the shattered glass, Sterling stood up. The silver-haired attorney did not say a word to Marcus. He did not offer counsel or suggest a defense strategy. He rapidly gathered his blank legal pads and shoved them into his briefcase. He snapped the brass latches shut. The sharp clicks were barely audible over Ashley's screaming. Sterling picked up his briefcase. He looked at me for a fleeting second. It was not a look of intimidation. It was a look of profound, terrified respect. He turned to Marcus, who was busy trying to grab Ashley's arm to stop her from leaving. "Mr. Rivera," Sterling said, projecting his voice just enough to cut through the noise, "I am formally terminating our attorney-client relationship, effective immediately. I cannot be party to federal fraud. Do not contact my office again." Sterling turned on his heel. He pushed through the velvet curtains and disappeared into the restaurant, fleeing the sinking ship as fast as his expensive leather shoes could carry him. Marcus watched his high-priced salvation walk out the door. The color drained from his face. He was alone. The lawyer was gone. The golden child was turning on him. His wife was sobbing over a broken wine glass. He slowly turned his head and looked at me, sitting quietly at the end of the table. He finally realized I had not brought a diary to the dinner. I brought a reckoning. And I had one final document left to play. The velvet curtains fluttered slightly as Sterling made his rapid exit. The air inside the private dining alcove felt stripped of oxygen. Ashley stood panting, her chest heaving with rage, clutching her smartphone like a weapon. Linda dabbed at the spilled wine on her dress with a soaked cloth napkin, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. The chaotic energy that usually sustained them had imploded, turning them against each other in a matter of minutes. Marcus sat slouched in his heavy wooden chair. The imposing patriarch from the funeral home was gone. He looked deflated, a hollow shell of the man who used to lock thermostats and dictate the terms of my survival. Fine beads of sweat gathered along his hairline. He dragged a trembling hand over his face. "Jasmine," he started. His voice was a thin, reedy rasp. It lacked the resonant authority he deployed when trying to humiliate me in public. "Please, you have to understand the pressure I was under. The spa was failing. Linda would not stop spending. I was drowning. If the bank auditors find that forged power of attorney, they will refer the case to the federal prosecutor. I will lose everything. The business, my reputation, my freedom." He leaned across the ruined table, ignoring the puddle of red wine seeping into the quitclaim deed. He looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. "Sign the deed. Just sign the property over to me. I will sell the commercial land immediately. I can pay back the federal loan before the audit triggers an indictment. I can make Ashley's debt disappear. I will even give you a cut of the profits from the sale. We can fix this, Jasmine. Be the bigger person here." He begged me to participate in his crime, to save him from the consequences of his own deceit. He asked me to surrender the legacy Abuela Rosa left me to cover the tracks of his fraud. I looked at his outstretched, trembling hands. I felt nothing but a cool, clinical detachment. The frantic scrambling of a cornered man did not move me. I reached into my manila folder. I pulled out the final document. It was a single, pristine sheet of paper enclosed in a clear plastic protective sleeve. "I do not think you fully grasp your situation, Dad," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through his frantic pleas. "Selling the commercial land will not save you, because the bank fraud is not your only problem." I slid the plastic sleeve across the table. It glided smoothly over the dry sections of the oak, stopping directly in front of his folded hands. Marcus looked down at the document. He squinted, trying to process the complex legal header. It was a commercial land lease agreement bearing the official seal of the state of Florida Corporate Registry. 10 years ago, you filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, I stated. Linda stopped dabbing her dress. Her head snapped up, her mascara-streaked eyes widened in horror. She stared at Marcus. "What is she talking about?" Linda demanded. "You told me your investment portfolio took a minor hit during the recession. You never said anything about bankruptcy." I kept my focus on Marcus. "You managed to keep the filing quiet because of a technicality," I continued. "You restructured your debt to avoid liquidating your primary residence. But the bank was going to foreclose on the property anyway because you fell behind on the mortgage payments. You were going to lose the house. You were going to lose the facade of wealth you spent your life building. Marcus stared at the lease agreement, the color completely drained from his lips. Abuela Rosa bailed you out, I said. She used her own savings to buy the physical plot of land beneath your house directly from the bank. She separated the structure of the house from the land it sat on. She placed the land into a private limited liability company. Then, she leased the dirt back to you. I pointed to a specific line on the document inside the plastic sleeve. Annual rent, $1. She allowed you to keep the structure of the house, but she owned the ground beneath it. She gave you a 99-year lease to ensure Linda and Ashley would not end up on the street. She sacrificed her own financial security to protect your pride. Ashley covered her mouth with her hand. She looked around the lavish restaurant alcove as if the walls were made of cardboard. We do not even own the land our house is built on, she whispered. No, I replied, you do not. I leaned forward. I locked eyes with Marcus. The 99-year lease contained a very specific death clause, I explained. Upon Rosa's passing, control of the LLC holding the land automatically transferred to the primary beneficiary of her estate. The lease immediately expired upon her death. It requires a formal renewal signature from the new owner of the LLC to remain active. I tapped the scratched plastic face of my Casio watch. Rosa died 2 weeks ago. The lease is void. Marcus gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles turned white. You cannot evict us, he stammered. His voice was barely a whisper. We built that house. It is our home. You cannot just kick us out into the street. I am not evicting you, I said. I pulled a bright yellow highlighter from my tote bag. I uncapped it and dragged the neon felt tip across a specific paragraph located near the bottom of the lease agreement. I pushed the highlighted section toward his line of sight. Rosa was a meticulous woman. She did not trust you to honor a simple lease. She built a penalty clause into the contract. Marcus read the highlighted text. His eyes darted back and forth across the page. A low, strangled sound escaped his throat. Before you can legally vacate the premises or attempt to sell the physical structure of the house to satisfy your debts, you must settle all outstanding liabilities owed to the landlord, I stated. The contract clearly defines those liabilities. You are legally required to repay the $40,000 custodial college fund you drained from my mother's life insurance policy 14 years ago. I let the number hang in the air. The silence in the alcove was absolute. Furthermore, I added, my tone shifting to the precise mathematical cadence of a forensic auditor, the contract stipulates that the $40,000 must be adjusted for inflation and compound interest, calculated at a rate of 8% annually over the last 14 years. I had run the amortization schedule on my dual monitors 2 nights prior. The math was devastating. You currently owe the LLC $117,482, I said. You cannot sell the house to pay back the Federal Credit Union because you do not hold a clear title to the land. You cannot abandon the property without triggering a massive civil lawsuit from my legal team for breach of contract, and you do not have the liquid cash to satisfy the penalty clause because your bank accounts are currently leveraged against the fraudulent med spa loan. The trap snapped shut with a resounding, inescapable finality. Marcus was pinned between 2 massive, crushing forces. On one side, the federal government was closing in on a $250,000 commercial bank fraud. On the other side, I held the physical ground beneath his home hostage until he repaid the exact sum he stole from a grieving 18-year-old girl. He could not run. He could not sell. He was entirely, mathematically, trapped. Linda let out a high-pitched, hysterical sob. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently as the reality of her impending poverty crashed down around her. Ashley slowly lowered her phone. She looked at Marcus not as a father or a provider, but as a dangerous liability. She realized she was shackled to a man about to face a federal indictment, and her own signature was forged on the corporate guarantees. Marcus sat paralyzed. The sweat dripped down his temples, stinging his eyes. He looked at the highlighted lease agreement, the forged power of attorney, and the ruined quitclaim deed floating in a puddle of spilled wine. The empire he built on lies and stolen money was collapsing around him in real time. He opened his mouth to speak, to beg, to try and negotiate a way out of the mathematical prison I had constructed. But no words came out. There was nothing left to say. The forensic math was absolute. The heavy velvet curtains trapped the stagnant air inside our private dining alcove. The mathematical reality of Marcus Rivera and his impending ruin sat in the center of the polished timber surface. No one reached for their water glasses. The ambient clatter of silverware and muffled laughter from the main restaurant felt miles away, separated by a thick fabric barrier that isolated us in a suffocating pocket of tension. Ashley was the first to move. The illusion of her glamorous Miami lifestyle evaporated in real time, replaced by the looming shadow of a federal indictment. She stared at the forged corporate guarantees bearing her falsified signature. Her manicured fingers gripped the edge of her smartphone, the knuckles turning a stark shade of white. She did not look at her mother, who was currently weeping into a ruined cloth napkin. She locked her gaze on her stepfather. The man who funded her private tuition with my stolen inheritance had just signed her death warrant to save his own skin. "You are insane," Ashley hissed. Her voice carried no warmth, only the sharp, metallic edge of pure self-preservation. "You forged my name on federal documents. You tied my business to your illegal bridge loan. I am not going down for your pathetic financial mistakes." Ashley stood up. Her heavy wooden chair scraped harshly against the floorboards, a jarring sound that pierced the quiet alcove. Marcus reached a trembling hand toward her. "Sweetheart, wait," he pleaded. His tone was weak, lacking any trace of the commanding authority he wielded at the funeral home. "We can hire a defense team. We can explain the situation to the auditors. I will protect you." Ashley slapped his hand away. "Do not touch me," she snarled, stepping back as if his proximity might infect her. "You have zero money for a defense team. You do not even own the dirt beneath your own driveway. I am calling my attorney in the morning, and I am telling them exactly what you did. You are dead to me." She snatched her designer handbag from the adjacent seat. She did not say goodbye to her mother. She spun on her heel and shoved through the thick velvet curtains, fleeing the alcove. The rapid click of her stilettos faded into the background noise of the main dining room. She abandoned the sinking ship without a single glance backward, discarding the man who pampered her the moment he became a liability. Linda watched her daughter abandon them. A fresh wave of hysterical sobs racked her chest. She realized the full scope of her impending poverty. The luxury SUV parked outside with the dealer tags was a mirage. The extravagant shopping trips, the country club memberships, the pristine manicures, all of it was funded by fraudulent debt and my grandmother's hidden charity. She turned her tear-streaked face toward Marcus. "You promised me security," Linda wailed, her voice pitched high, shrill with panic and betrayal. "You told me we were wealthy. You told me the bankruptcy was a minor restructuring. I gave you my best years, and you turned me into an accomplice to a felony. My cousin is going to lose her notary license because of your lies. We are going to lose everything." Marcus shrank under her verbal assault. He possessed no defense. The undeniable proof rested on the table in front of them. Linda pushed her chair back. She refused to sit next to a man facing imminent federal prosecution. She stood trembling, clutching her diamond pendant as if someone might strip it from her neck at any moment. "I am filing for divorce tomorrow," Linda stated. Her voice shook, but the underlying greed solidified her resolve. I will not let the government seize my personal accounts to pay for your crimes. She grabbed her silk shawl, shot Marcus a look of unadulterated disgust, and stumbled out of the alcove. She left a trail of expensive perfume and shattered illusions in her wake. And then there were two. Marcus and I sat alone in the dim light of the private enclosure. The tough, unyielding patriarch who locked a grieving teenager in a sweltering garage was gone. He looked small. His tailored charcoal suit suddenly appeared too large for his deflating frame. The silver hair he meticulously styled hung limp across his forehead, damp with cold sweat. He stared at the neon highlight marks on the lease agreement. The staggering penalty fee of $117,000 stared back at him. He shifted his gaze to the forged power of attorney. He possessed no leverage. He held no bargaining chips. He was a dictator stripped of his kingdom, abandoned by his loyal subjects the second the gold ran out. He looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot. The arrogant smirk he wore earlier in the evening was replaced by a desperate, hollow pleading. "Jasmine," he whispered. His voice broke on the second syllable. "Please, you have to stop this." I kept my hands resting gently in my lap. I did not respond. I allowed his panic to fill the silence. "I am your father," Marcus stammered, leaning over the ruined table. "I did the best I could. You do not understand the pressure of providing for a family. Linda expected a certain standard of living. Ashley required constant financial support. I made mistakes. I took shortcuts. But I did it to keep this family together." He tried to weaponize guilt, reverting to his oldest tactic. He expected me to absorb his burden. He wanted me to fix the mess he created, just as he expected me to absorb the heat of the garage so his stepdaughter could sleep in comfort. "If you do not sign the quitclaim deed, the bank will uncover the forgery," he continued. His words tumbled out in a frantic, disjointed rush. "The federal prosecutors will not show mercy. They will seize the house. They will throw me in prison. You cannot send your own flesh and blood to a federal penitentiary over a piece of undeveloped land." He reached across the table, extending his arms in a pathetic gesture of submission. His hands shook with intense, uncontrollable tremors. As he stretched forward, his wrist clipped the stem of his full wine glass. The heavy crystal tipped over. A pool of dark red Cabernet surged across the pristine white tablecloth. The liquid spread rapidly, soaking into the fabric, looking like a fresh, expanding wound. It flooded over the edges of the unsigned quitclaim deed, staining the legal document a deep, ruined crimson. The wine dripped off the edge of the mahogany surface and splashed onto the expensive carpet below. Marcus stared at the spilled wine. His shoulders hunched forward. He looked defeated, pathetic, and broken. "Be the bigger person," he begged, staring at the spreading red stain. "Forgive me. Show some grace. Sign the paper and save my life." I watched the wine soak into the edges of the paper. I felt no pity. I felt no urge to comfort the man sobbing across the table. The emotional manipulation that controlled my childhood held zero power over the woman I became. I reached forward and carefully gathered my documents. I retrieved the certified copy of Rosa's irrevocable trust, the metadata logs, and the highlighted lease agreement. I tapped the edges of the crisp paper against the table, aligning them perfectly. I slid the stack into the plastic protective sleeves and placed them back inside my manila folder. I zipped the folder safely into my leather tote bag. I stood up. I smoothed the skirt of my simple navy dress. I looked down at the trembling man in the charcoal suit. "You locked the thermostat," I said quietly. My voice lacked any trace of anger or malice. It was smooth, clinical, and precise. "You moved my bed next to a chest freezer. You drained the safety net my mother spent 10 years building. You threw your stepdaughter into federal debt. You lied to your wife. You forged the signature of a dying woman." Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. A single tear tracked through the sweat on his cheek. "You did not make mistakes," I continued. "You made calculated decisions. You sacrificed everyone around you to preserve an illusion of wealth. You demanded toughness from a 14-year-old girl so you could pamper your own ego." I picked up my tote bag and slung the strap over my shoulder. I looked at his shaking hands, at the ruined dinner, at the shattered remnants of his fake empire. "I would love to help you fix this, Dad," I said. I paused, letting the silence stretch for one agonizing second. "But I am just a low-level bookkeeper." I turned my back on him. I pushed the heavy velvet curtains aside. The bustling noise of the steakhouse washed over me, bright and alive. I did not look over my shoulder. I walked past the crowded tables, past the host stand, and out the front doors into the cool evening air. I left him sitting alone in the dark alcove, trapped with the spilled wine, the stained deed, and the astronomical check for a dinner that cost him his entire life. The morning sun cast long golden shadows across the hardwood floor of my home office. 2 weeks had passed since the velvet curtains closed on the ruined dinner at the steakhouse. I sat in my ergonomic chair, bathed in the cool glow of my dual monitors. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic chirping of a mockingbird outside the window. David walked into the room. He carried 2 ceramic mugs of dark roast coffee. He set one down near my keyboard. The steam curled upward, carrying the rich, roasted scent through the air. He did not ask what I was working on. He stood behind my chair, resting his large, calloused hands on my shoulders. His silent presence anchored me. I was not working on a corporate client account. I was monitoring a digital demolition. I typed my credentials into the Public Access to Court electronic records system. The federal database served as a central repository for United States legal proceedings. As a forensic auditor, navigating the labyrinth of government dockets was second nature. I entered a specific name into the search query. The screen loaded. A new criminal docket materialized. The header read, United States of America versus Marcus Rivera. The Federal Credit Union acted swiftly. Once Mr. Sterling abandoned his client, Marcus possessed no legal shield to delay the inevitable. The bank auditors scrutinized the commercial bridge loan. They contacted the county clerk to verify the deed transfer. They discovered the irrevocable trust holding the 40 acres of prime commercial real estate. The deception unraveled in a matter of days. The investigators flagged the power of attorney as fraudulent and referred the file directly to the Department of Justice. I scrolled through the list of formal charges: wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, bank fraud. The language used by the federal prosecutors was clinical, precise, and entirely devoid of emotion. They detailed how the defendant utilized a falsified notary stamp to pledge assets he did not own. The court issued a freeze order on every financial account tied to his Social Security number. The bank locked his checking balances, his savings, and his retirement portfolios. His debit cards would decline at the grocery store. His automatic mortgage payments would bounce. The wealth he spent decades projecting evaporated into restricted government holds. The authorities seized his passport. He was ordered to surrender to the federal courthouse for arraignment. I took a sip of the hot coffee. The bitter liquid warmed my throat. I felt no urge to celebrate. I felt no vindictive joy. I merely observed the relentless machinery of the justice system, correcting a severe mathematical error. I opened a new browser tab. I accessed the local county family court portal. A fresh civil filing appeared near the top of the daily registry. The petitioner was listed as Linda Rivera. The illusion of their perfect marriage shattered the moment the federal government restricted the cash flow. Linda did not stand by her husband during his darkest hour. She hired an aggressive family law attorney the morning after the steakhouse debacle. I read through her petition for dissolution of marriage. Her legal filings painted a vivid picture of her panic. She submitted emergency injunctions attempting to sever her personal assets from his criminal liabilities. She requested sole ownership of the luxury silver SUV and the remaining funds in her individual checking account. She cited irreconcilable differences, but the subtext was glaringly obvious. She wanted to build a financial firewall to protect herself from the impending restitution orders. Her loyalty extended only as far as his credit limit. When the balance hit zero, her devotion vanished. David leaned closer, reading the glowing screen over my shoulder. He let out a low, quiet breath. "They are turning on each other," he noted. "Greed is a fragile adhesive," I replied. "It only holds things together when the weather is clear. The moment a storm hits, everyone grabs a life vest and jumps ship." I closed the family court database. I opened the final portal I needed to check for the day. It was the county foreclosure registry. This was the mechanism that would ultimately dismantle Marcus's physical kingdom. The federal bank fraud stripped his freedom and his liquid assets, but the real estate trap I revealed at the dinner table ensured he lost his sanctuary. I refreshed the page. The status indicator next to his home address shifted from delinquent to active foreclosure. The financial institution holding the mortgage on his luxury McMansion initiated the seizure process. Marcus defaulted on the loan payments because his accounts were frozen by the federal indictment. But the foreclosure proceedings encountered a monumental legal barricade. The bank attempted to seize the collateral to auction it off and recoup their losses. They quickly realized they could not sell the estate with a clear title. The structure of the house belonged to the bank, but the dirt beneath the foundation belonged to my limited liability company. The 99-year lease violation triggered the penalty clause. The title was hopelessly clouded. No sane buyer would purchase a foreclosed mansion knowing they did not own the land it sat on, especially with a staggering penalty fee attached to the dirt. The property became a toxic asset to the mortgage lender. However, the bank needed to mitigate their financial exposure. They could not sell the home, but they could take possession of the physical structure. They filed the formal eviction paperwork to remove the defaulting occupant from the premises. I watched the digital registry confirm the issuance of the writ of possession. The sheriff's department would dispatch deputies to post the eviction notice on his heavy oak front door within 48 hours. I did not hire an attorney to sue him. I did not engage in a messy public screaming match on social media to clear my name. I did not waste a single breath arguing with aunts or cousins who chose to believe his lies. I simply laid out the evidence and let the forensic math do the heavy lifting. The systems he tried to manipulate swallowed him whole. David squeezed my shoulder. "You built a masterpiece," he said quietly. "I did not build it," I corrected him. "I just read the blueprints Abuela Rosa left behind. He built his own cage. He just refused to look at the lock." The screen blinked. The foreclosure update finalized. Marcus Rivera was officially stripped of his title, his wife, and his home. The man who banished a grieving teenager to a sweltering garage was about to be forced out into the unforgiving Florida heat. He possessed no hidden funds. His friends in high places severed ties the moment the indictment went public. He needed a place to sleep. He needed a roof over his head. The sprawling McMansion would soon be locked and chained by the mortgage lender. He only had one remaining option. He had to seek shelter with the only person left in his fractured orbit. He had to pack whatever belongings he could carry and ask for mercy from the golden child he threw under the bus. He had to face Ashley. The stage was set for a brutal reunion. He expected her to harbor him, relying on the same toxic family loyalty he abused for years. He was about to discover that the daughter he spoiled possessed a memory just as sharp as the daughter he discarded. The final week of August brought a suffocating blanket of humidity over central Florida. The air felt heavy, dense with approaching afternoon thunderstorms. I stood in my climate-controlled kitchen, watching David slice a fresh cantaloupe on the granite cutting board. The gentle hum of the central air conditioning provided a steady, comforting rhythm to our morning routine. My smartphone, resting near the coffee maker, buzzed. The screen lit up with a new text message. I did not recognize the number immediately. I dried my hands on a dish towel and picked up the device. I tapped the notification. The message was long, fractured, and brimming with poorly concealed venom. It was from Ashley. We had not spoken since the disastrous reconciliation dinner at the steakhouse. I assumed she blocked my number after realizing the scope of Marcus's betrayal. But desperation often forces people to reach out to the very individuals they previously despised. I read the message. The sheer, poetic symmetry of her complaint nearly took my breath away. I cannot deal with him anymore. The federal investigators froze the business accounts. The med spa is locked up by the landlord. He showed up at my apartment yesterday with 2 suitcases. The bank kicked him out of the house. Linda took the SUV and refuses to answer his calls. He is sleeping in my spare room. The window unit is broken. It is 90 degrees in there. All he does is sweat and complain about the heat. I told him to stop whining. I told him he is tough. He can handle it. I stared at the glowing screen. I read the final 2 sentences a second time. I told him he is tough. He can handle it. A slow, quiet smile spread across my face. I did not laugh out loud. I did not feel a sudden rush of triumphant adrenaline. I felt a profound, settling peace. The universe possesses a remarkable sense of balance. The words he used to banish a grieving 14-year-old girl to a concrete floor had traveled across time, returning to lock him inside his own sweltering exile. David noticed the shift in my posture. He set down the paring knife and wiped his hands. "What is it?" he asked. I handed him the phone. He read the text message. His eyes crinkled at the corners. He handed the device back to me. "Karma is an incredibly efficient collection agency," he observed quietly. I leaned against the counter. Marcus Rivera, the man who demanded absolute comfort, who projected wealth through tailored suits and luxury vehicles, was now trapped in a cramped, unair-conditioned spare room in a tiny apartment. He possessed no bank accounts. He possessed no wife to manage his schedule. He faced a looming federal indictment that guaranteed he would never work in the financial sector again. He sought refuge with the golden child he sacrificed to save his own skin. He expected Ashley to harbor him, relying on the same toxic family loyalty he manipulated for years. He expected her to offer him the master bedroom. He expected her to cater to his complaints. He severely misjudged the monster he created. Ashley did not learn compassion from him. She learned transaction. When he possessed wealth and power, she played the role of the adoring daughter. The moment he became a destitute liability facing federal charges, she stripped away the affection. She relegated him to the hottest, most uncomfortable corner of her apartment. She fed his own cruel justifications right back to him. The sweltering spare room was his new garage. I typed a short, clinical reply to Ashley. Keep all documentation regarding the med spa corporate guarantees. Provide them directly to the federal prosecutors. Cooperate fully, and you may avoid indictment. I hit send. I offered her the only piece of advice she needed to survive the wreckage her stepfather caused. I did not offer sympathy. I did not offer her a place to stay. I closed the messaging application and set the phone face down on the granite. Marcus was experiencing the total collapse of his ecosystem. The physical discomfort of the broken window unit was only a fraction of his torment. The true agony stemmed from his loss of control. He could no longer dictate the narrative. He could no longer lock the thermostat. He was at the mercy of a daughter who despised him. The heat in that spare room would break his pride. The complaints would fall on deaf ears. The silence from his extended family would amplify his isolation. Aunts and cousins who previously believed his lies about my mental instability were now reading the public federal court dockets. The community ostracized him. The church members who offered Linda prayers turned their backs on the man indicted for forging a dying woman's signature. He was drowning in a sea of consequences. But a man like Marcus does not simply accept defeat. He does not quietly endure the heat and wait for the federal marshals to escort him to an arraignment hearing. Narcissism demands a final attempt to reclaim the narrative. It demands a desperate, flailing grasp at whatever leverage remains. He knew Ashley would inevitably kick him out of the apartment. Her tolerance for his presence was razor thin. He needed a permanent solution. He needed a physical sanctuary. He needed the bank to stop the foreclosure proceedings on his beloved McMansion so he could return to the only place that made him feel powerful. There was only one person on earth who held the keys to that sanctuary. He needed the sole owner of the limited liability company to sign a lease renewal, waive the astronomical penalty fee, and clear the title. He needed the low-level bookkeeper he discarded to grant him mercy. I walked over to the kitchen window and looked out at the lush green sanctuary David built in our backyard. Dark, heavy storm clouds were gathering on the western horizon. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak trees. The afternoon thunderstorm was moments away from breaking over the suburbs. Marcus was out of options. He could not hire a lawyer to bully me. He could not deploy Linda to manipulate the family. He could not use Ashley as a human shield. He was stripped bare. He had to face me directly, without the armor of his wealth or the audience of a high-end steakhouse. He had to make the journey. He had to cross the physical distance between his sweltering exile and the fortress I constructed. The sky darkened rapidly. The first heavy drops of rain began to strike the glass pane of the kitchen window. The storm arrived with sudden, violent intensity. Lightning flashed across the gray clouds, followed immediately by a low, rumbling crack of thunder. I watched the rain wash over the driveway. The stage was set. The trap was sprung. The consequences were delivered. The only thing left was the final act of a broken king begging at the gates of the castle he never truly owned. I knew he was coming. I simply waited for the knock. The afternoon thunderstorm battered the roof of my house. The rain fell in sheets, transforming the driveway into a shallow, rushing river. I stood at the kitchen counter, watching the paper shredder consume the last of the junk mail. The mechanical whir of the blades provided a steady drone underneath the sound of thunder. In my left hand, I held the original copy of the commercial land lease renewal, the document Marcus needed to stop the foreclosure of his McMansion. The annual rent line clearly stated $1. I held the document over the feeding slot of the shredder. I did not intend to sign it. I did not intend to negotiate. I kept it purely as a physical reminder of the power dynamic that now existed between us. The doorbell chimed. The sharp, two-tone electronic ring cut through the noise of the storm. I lowered the lease renewal. I did not rush. I set the paper down on the granite counter next to my coffee mug. I walked out of the kitchen and into the dimly lit foyer. My bare feet moved silently across the hardwood floor. The front door was heavy oak, reinforced with thick weather stripping to keep out the humid Florida air. I leaned forward and looked through the small glass peephole. Marcus Rivera stood on my covered porch. He was entirely exposed to the driving rain blowing sideways past the support columns. He did not look like the commanding bank manager who presided over our Thanksgiving dinners. He did not look like the slick, suited patriarch who tried to bribe me with a Rolex at an upscale steakhouse. He looked old. He looked hollow. He wore a rumpled, tan trench coat that clung to his arms, heavy and dark with rainwater. His silver hair, usually perfectly styled, lay plastered flat against his forehead. Water dripped from his nose and chin. He shivered, pulling his arms tight against his chest. In his right hand, gripped tightly despite the downpour, he held a sodden, wrinkled piece of paper. The bold black lettering of the bank eviction notice bled slightly at the edges, but his printed name remained clearly legible near the top. He stared directly into the doorbell camera lens. He knew I was watching. He knew I held the power to open the door or leave him standing in the storm. I reached for the brass handle. I turned the lock mechanism. I opened the heavy oak door inward, but only 3 inches. The thick brass security chain caught, pulling taut against the frame. The roar of the storm rushed into the quiet foyer. The smell of wet asphalt and crushed pine needles filled the air. Marcus flinched at the sound of the opening door. He stepped closer, pressing his face near the 3-inch gap. The rain dripped off the tip of his nose, falling rapidly onto the porch floorboards. The visual symmetry was striking. I watched the water run down his face, and I immediately recalled the stinging beads of sweat sliding down my own cheeks when I was 14 years old, locked inside a concrete box. He ignored my discomfort then. I observed his misery now with the clinical detachment of a scientist evaluating a specimen. "Jasmine," he whispered. His voice was raw, scraped hollow by desperation and fear. "Please." He held up the soaked eviction notice, pressing it against the crack in the doorway. The county sheriff's department finalized the writ of possession. He was legally barred from entering the McMansion. The bag seized the structure, and Ashley kicked him out of the sweltering spare room. He was a fugitive from his own life. "Not like this," Marcus pleaded. He pressed his hand flat against the wet wood of the doorframe. "I have nowhere else to go. The feds froze the last of the checking accounts this morning. I cannot afford a hotel. I cannot rent an apartment. Linda will not answer her phone." Ashley threw my suitcases onto the sidewalk. I looked at his shaking hand. I looked at the water pooling at his feet. I did not unhook the brass security chain. "I am your father," he said. The words cracked on the final syllable. He attempted to deploy his ultimate weapon. He tried to invoke the biological tie, the societal expectation that a child must unconditionally harbor their parent, regardless of the toxicity they inflicted. He expected the title of father to act as a skeleton key, unlocking the door to my sanctuary. I studied his eyes through the narrow gap. I searched for a shred of genuine remorse. I looked for an apology regarding the stolen college fund, the forged signature, or the smear campaign he launched to destroy my husband's business. I found nothing but self-preservation. He was not sorry for what he did to me. He was only terrified of the consequences he currently faced. "You are a man who forged a dying woman's signature to steal $250,000, I stated. My voice was low, steady, and audible over the pouring rain. "You are a man who drained a life insurance policy to buy a luxury SUV. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. "Jasmine, I will do whatever you want. I will sign whatever you need. Just let me come inside. Let me dry off. We can fix the lease. You can keep the land. Just let me stay here until the trial." He still believed he possessed something to negotiate with. He thought his physical presence, his immediate suffering, would override my logic. He assumed the low-level bookkeeper would eventually cave to empathy. I leaned closer to the gap. The cool, damp air brushed against my face. "You locked the thermostat on a grieving 14-year-old girl," I said softly. Marcus opened his eyes. He stared at me, the memory of the sweltering garage crashing into the reality of the thunderstorm. The color drained from his lips, leaving them a pale, sickly gray. He realized in that exact moment that I had not forgotten a single detail. I carried the heat of that garage with me for 18 years. I used it to forge my armor. I used it to build the very walls he currently stood outside of. I looked at the rain battering his trench coat. I looked at the eviction notice crushed in his fist. "You are tough, Dad," I told him. My words echoed the exact phrasing he used to justify my banishment. "You can handle the weather." I reached out and gripped the heavy brass handle of the oak door. Marcus gasped. He shoved his fingers into the narrow gap, trying to physically prevent me from closing the barrier between us. "Wait!" he cried out, his voice shrill with panic. "Please, do not do this!" I applied steady, unyielding pressure to the door. The heavy wood pushed against his fingers. He lacked the leverage to hold it open. He ripped his hand back just before the door slammed shut. The solid oak met the doorframe with a resounding, permanent crash. I reached up and turned the heavy deadbolt. The metal locking mechanism slid into the strike plate with a deeply satisfying, heavy thud. The sound severed the connection completely. The storm raged outside. The rain continued to fall. But inside my foyer, the air was still, cool, and perfectly controlled. I did not look through the peephole to watch him walk back to his beat-up sedan. I did not care where he went. I turned my back to the front door and walked away, leaving the architect of my childhood misery standing alone in the dark, cold rain. 6 months passed since the afternoon thunderstorm washed Marcus Rivera off my front porch. The federal justice system moves with a slow, grinding inevitability. I read the updates on the public court docket over my morning coffee. Marcus accepted a plea deal for wire fraud and identity theft. He traded his tailored charcoal suits for a standard-issue uniform provided by the federal penitentiary system. Linda finalized her divorce and relocated to a small rented condo, her luxury lifestyle evaporating into a tall stack of legal bills. Ashley moved to another state, leaving behind a trail of unpaid commercial leases and shattered illusions. They scattered like ash in the wind. I remained exactly where I was, anchored by the truth and the solid ground beneath my feet. The financial institution holding the mortgage on the sprawling McMansion faced a severe logistical nightmare. The bank possessed the physical structure of a luxury home, but they lacked the legal right to the dirt it occupied. Every month the house sat empty, the bank bled capital. They attempted to find a buyer to recoup their losses. Real estate investors took one look at the 99-year lease and the exorbitant penalty clause attached to the land and immediately walked away. The property became a toxic liability on the corporate ledger. I waited patiently. I let the asset managers sweat over the depreciating estate. The yard grew wild. The homeowner association fines piled up. When the fiscal quarter approached its end, I directed my attorney to submit a formal purchase offer to the bank. I bid pennies on the dollar. I offered them a mere fraction of the original construction cost to take the liability off their hands. The bank executives possessed zero leverage. They ran the risk assessment models and realized fighting my limited liability company in civil court was a losing battle. They accepted my low offer within 48 hours. I purchased the castle my father built using the leverage Abuela Rosa left me. I walked through the front doors of the empty estate holding the final, unencumbered deed. The house smelled of stale air and abandoned ambition. The grand foyer, the sweeping staircase, the extravagant crystal chandelier, all felt hollow. I did not buy the property to live in it. I already had a home with David, a sanctuary filled with natural sunlight and genuine warmth. I bought this structure to rewrite its purpose. I hired David and his commercial landscaping crew for the interior demolition. We did not remodel the estate. We dismantled the hierarchy it represented. I stood in the upstairs hallway on a crisp Tuesday morning and gave the order to tear it apart. The crew took heavy steel sledgehammers to the master suite. The sprawling bedroom Marcus prioritized over my well-being. The lavish space he gifted to Ashley while locking me away was ripped down to the bare wooden studs. The drywall crumbled. The expensive crown molding splintered into dust. The pale pink paint Ashley chose for her walls flaked and fell to the floor in jagged pieces. We removed the luxury fixtures and stripped the expansive walk-in closets where Linda hoarded her designer shoes. We erased the physical monument to his favoritism. We hauled the debris out to rented iron dumpsters in the driveway. Then I turned my attention to the garage, the concrete box where I spent my teenage years sweating through humid Florida nights required a different kind of intervention. We did not destroy the space. We elevated it. I poured a portion of the recovered college fund into a total structural overhaul. David and his team installed thick, premium insulation along every interior wall and across the expansive ceiling. We laid down durable, medical-grade epoxy flooring over the bare, cracked concrete where my mattress used to lay. We brought in commercial HVAC specialists to install a top-tier, hospital-quality ventilation system. We fitted the renovated room with custom-built, spacious enclosures featuring tempered glass doors and automated water filtration stations. We installed stainless steel wash basins and stocked the cabinets with premium supplies. We transformed the site of my isolation into a state-of-the-art animal rescue sanctuary. The local county shelters operated at maximum capacity, often struggling to provide adequate care for abandoned dogs and cats. I opened the doors of the newly renovated facility to those forgotten animals. I named the building the Rosa Rivera Animal Haven. The space that once served as a sweltering prison for a grieving 14-year-old girl now functioned as a safe, comfortable refuge for creatures who needed a second chance. The sound of the chest freezer rattling in the summer heat was replaced by the soft panting of sleeping golden retrievers and the quiet purring of rescued tabbies. The sharp, bitter scent of old lawn fertilizer vanished, replaced by the clean, crisp smell of veterinary-grade sanitizers and fresh linen. I walked through the sanctuary on our opening day. The bright fluorescent lighting illuminated the pristine enclosures. Several rescue dogs rested comfortably on thick orthopedic beds. They were safe. They were protected. They were not treated as an inconvenience to be shoved into a dark corner. I stopped near the main entrance of the renovated garage. Mounted on the freshly painted drywall was a brand new, digital, smart thermostat. The screen glowed with a soft, welcoming blue light. There was no clear plastic shield bolted over the interface. There was no heavy brass padlock. There was no key hidden in a patriarch's pocket to restrict access to comfort. I reached out. I pressed the sleek touchscreen with my index finger. The digital numbers shifted downward. I set the internal climate to a cool, perfect 70 degrees. The commercial air conditioning unit hummed to life above me. A wave of crisp, refreshing air pushed through the overhead vents. The breeze brushed past my face, chilling my skin in the best possible way. The environment responded instantly to my command. I lowered my hand and checked the time. The scratched plastic face of my pawn shop Casio watch caught the blue light of the thermostat. The deep groove across the digital numbers served as a constant reminder of the journey. My time was my own. My environment was under my control. The shadows of the past no longer dictated my temperature. The world often attempts to sell us a distorted definition of resilience. Toxic people will drain your resources, cross your boundaries, and subject you to harsh conditions. When you endure their mistreatment, they will pat you on the back and call you tough. They will frame your suffering as a compliment. They use the concept of strength to justify their own selfish choices, hoping you will accept the heavy burden without ever demanding respect in return. I learned the truth the hard way. True resilience has nothing to do with how much pain you can silently absorb. Strength is not letting people walk all over you while you smile and pretend it does not hurt. Real strength is gathering the receipts. It is learning the systems they use against you. It is watching the empire they built on your back crumble under the weight of its own deception. Real strength is buying the castle they banished you from and giving the keys to someone who deserves it. My name is Jasmine Rivera. I am 32 years old. I survived the heat and I changed the locks. If you stayed with me until the very end, thank you. I share this journey not to boast about a victory, but to remind anyone sitting in the dark that the balance always shifts. The truth always leaves a paper trail. Before we part ways, I have one final question for you. Think about the person who tried to diminish your worth. Think about the individual who mistook your quiet patience for weakness. If you could write one single text message to the person who underestimated you, what would it say? Drop your message in the comments below. I read every single one, and I know how powerful it feels to finally put those words out into the universe. If this story resonated with you, make sure to hit the subscribe button and join the Eva Tells Stories community. We have many more journeys to share. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and never let anyone else control your thermostat. I will see you in the next one. The concept of home in American culture is more than just an architectural structure of wood, brick, and drywall. It is the fundamental incubator of our values, the quiet sanctuary where children first learn what it means to be valued, protected, and treated with fairness. We are taught that the traditional family structure is a fortress against an unpredictable world. But what happens when the architect of that fortress decides to lock the gates from the inside? The story of Jasmine Rivera is not merely a tale of a brilliant forensic auditor outsmarting a corrupt father. Beneath the dramatic reveals, the forged documents, and the poetic justice of a reclaimed McMansion lies a profound, haunting reflection on the sacred duties of parenting. It holds a mirror up to the silent choices we make in our own living rooms, asking us to evaluate the emotional legacy we are leaving for our children. In observing Marcus Rivera, we witness the devastating weaponization of a virtue highly prized in American society: toughness. Resilience, grit, and self-reliance are cornerstones of the American ethos. We want our children to be strong enough to weather life's inevitable storms. But true parenting requires a deep, emotional awareness to understand the critical difference between teaching a child to be resilient and forcing them to endure neglect. When Marcus moved a grieving 14-year-old girl into a sweltering, uninsulated garage so his new stepdaughter could enjoy the master suite, he did not do it to build Jasmine's character. He did it for his own convenience, masking his profound failure of familial responsibility behind the guise of a compliment. "You are tough," he told her. "You can handle it." How often do parents fall into this trap? We look at our self-sufficient, quiet children, the ones who do not demand our constant attention, the ones who absorb our missteps without complaint, and we assume they do not need our softness. We redirect our resources, our patience, and our comfort to the children who scream the loudest, or, in Marcus's case, the ones who stroke our egos. This is a catastrophic failure of emotional awareness. A child's ability to survive your neglect does not absolve you of your responsibility to nurture them. Strength should never be the currency a child has to pay to excuse a parent's selfishness. Furthermore, Jasmine's journey forces us to confront the undeniable necessity of honesty and fairness within the family unit, particularly in the complex dynamics of blended families. When Marcus secretly drained the life insurance policy Jasmine's late mother had carefully set aside for her college tuition, he committed a theft far greater than money. He stole her trust in the institution of family. In American culture, the promise of the next generation doing better than the last is a sacred generational contract. Parents work double shifts, sacrifice personal luxuries, and meticulously save to provide their children with a stepping stone into adulthood. By reallocating Jasmine's rightful future to fund Ashley's out-of-state tuition and Linda's luxury SUV, Marcus shattered the foundational concept of fairness. A family cannot survive when its internal economy is built on favoritism and deceit. Children have an innate, almost infallible radar for injustice. They watch where the resources flow, where the affection is directed, and where the truth is bent. When a parent chooses to build an illusion of wealth and harmony on a foundation of lies, that structure will inevitably collapse under its own weight. Yet within this dark exploration of parental failure, we are also given a breathtaking example of what true, long-term familial responsibility looks like. Abuela Rosa represents the quiet, enduring wisdom that anchors the best of traditional family values. She understood that she could not directly combat the toxic narcissism of her son-in-law without risking her access to her granddaughter. So, she played the long game. Rosa's foresight in purchasing the land beneath the McMansion and placing it into an irrevocable trust was an act of profound, protective love. True parenting and true elder guidance is not always about fighting the loud, messy battles in the present. Sometimes, it is about quietly laying the bricks for a bridge your child will need 10 years in the future. It is about slipping $50 bills into a mailbox, offering a glass of iced tea in a sweltering garage, and establishing legal safety nets that a child can rely on when they are finally ready to stand their ground. Rosa taught us that genuine family responsibility requires vision. It requires looking past the immediate chaos of the present and ensuring the child is equipped to survive long after you are gone. We are all writing the scripts of our children's lives through our daily actions. Every time we prioritize our pride over our child's comfort, every time we bend the truth to avoid accountability, and every time we reward entitlement while punishing quiet resilience, we are drafting a tragedy. Jasmine's ultimate victory, transforming the very garage that served as her prison into a climate-controlled sanctuary for abandoned animals, is a beautiful testament to the human spirit's ability to heal. But it is also a sobering reminder that she had to heal from the very people who were supposed to protect her. Narratives like Jasmine's resonate so deeply because they touch the silent, often unspoken chords of our own family histories. They challenge us to look at the power dynamics within our own homes and ask the difficult questions about fairness, honesty, and emotional safety. If you find yourself captivated by these deep dives into the human condition, if you value stories that explore the delicate, sometimes fractured bonds of family and the triumphant resilience of the human spirit, I warmly invite you to follow Eva Tells Stories. Together, we will continue to explore the complex, beautiful, and sometimes painful realities of the lives we build behind closed doors. As you step away from this story and back into your own life, take a moment to look around the space you call home. Look at the people who rely on your guidance, your fairness, and your honesty. The legacy we leave our children is rarely found in the bank accounts we pass down or the physical properties we bequeath. Our true legacy is etched into their emotional framework. It is found in how they speak to themselves when they fail, and how fiercely they protect their boundaries when they are challenged. We must ask ourselves what kind of architects we are choosing to be. Are we building a castle where our children feel safe, valued, and equally cherished? Or are we, through our own unexamined pride and hidden compromises, quietly constructing a cage? The thermostat of your family's future is in your hands. How you choose to set the temperature today will echo for generations to come.